The house on Hillside Avenue looked quiet on the morning the neighbors realized something was wrong. It was large, brick, and stately, perched on a slope in Westfield, New Jersey, with tall windows and a long driveway that usually held a few cars. But for days the lights had burned through the night, glowing behind drawn curtains. The milk deliveries sat untouched on the porch. Mail gathered in a neat stack just inside the front door, visible through the beveled glass. And the silence surrounding the property felt unnatural, as though someone had turned the volume down on an entire family at once. Inside that house, John List had spent the previous weeks unraveling. He was a man known for tidiness, straight lines, and routines that never drifted. A former accountant and Army veteran, he believed in discipline and order, and he expected the same from his family. But by late 1971, everything he valued seemed to be slipping. He had lost his job months earlier and hid the truth behind a set of carefully maintained lies. Each morning he left home dressed for work, carrying an empty briefcase, spending his days at the train station or in quiet corners of the city, searching for a position that never materialized. The bills grew. The mortgage loomed. His savings evaporated. His mother, who lived in the upstairs apartment, depended on him. His wife, Helen, struggled with health problems he rarely discussed. His children, Patricia, Fred, and John Jr., were teenagers growing into their own lives, drifting from the rigid structure he tried to enforce. He felt control slipping through his fingers, and he believed he was the only one who noticed. As the pressure mounted, List retreated further into himself. He spent hours pacing the halls of the house, debating what he called a burden nobody else could understand. His Lutheran faith, once steady, bent under the strain. He convinced himself that poverty would destroy his family more surely than anything he might do. The idea grew slowly, taking shape in long nights and quiet mornings, until he reached a conclusion that no one around him could have imagined. He would save them by sending them to heaven before they faced the humiliation he believed was coming. On the morning of November 9th, 1971, List prepared the house with the calmness of a man arranging paperwork. He woke before dawn, dressed in a suit, and moved through the rooms deliberately. He turned off certain appliances, set others aside, wrote notes, and stacked documents in neat piles. When his children left for school, the house fell into a stillness he used to complete what he had already decided. He confronted his wife first, then his mother upstairs. He moved with a strange clarity, staying focused on the task as though performing an unpleasant obligation rather than an emotional act. When the children returned home later that day, he met each of them with the same finality. The nature of the acts themselves was never described in graphic detail by investigators, but their sequence revealed a chilling sense of organization. List laid the bodies of his wife and children on sleeping bags in the ballroom side by side, as if arranging them for a final viewing. His mother remained upstairs, too heavy for him to move. Once the house was quiet, he cleaned up, changed clothes, and sat down to write letters explaining his reasoning. He addressed them to his pastor and to the school. He apologized for the disruption, but insisted he had acted out of mercy. That night, he made himself a meal, locked the doors, and wrote checks to keep utilities running a little longer. Then he packed his car, drove away from Westfield, and began a new life under a different name. The family station wagon rolled out of New Jersey unnoticed, carrying a man who believed he had carried out a grim duty rather than a crime. Back on Hillside Avenue, the neighbors watched the house grow stranger by the day. The lights stayed on. The windows remained covered. No cars moved in or out. The sounds of life that usually drifted through the quiet suburban street vanished. One of Patricia's drama teachers tried calling the house repeatedly, troubled by her absence. Mail carriers mentioned the growing pile behind the front door. But List had mailed letters claiming the family was leaving town for an emergency. The explanations held off suspicion for a while. Nearly a month passed before police entered the house. The moment they stepped inside, the air felt unnervingly still. The lights were all on, humming softly. Classical music played through the intercom system, looping endlessly. The officers followed the sound to the ballroom, where they discovered the carefully arranged bodies. The scene was strangely orderly, lacking the chaos usually associated with violent crime. Upstairs, they found List's mother. In the kitchen, they found notes, instructions, apologies, and a long letter explaining his financial fears and his belief that this was the only way to protect the souls of the people he loved. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Westfield was known for quiet streets and well-kept homes, not for a crime that felt almost staged in its precision. Reporters crowded the neighborhood. School officials struggled to break the news to classmates. Church members tried to reconcile the man they knew with the methodical killer described in police reports. And investigators began the long process of tracing his steps, but he had planned too well. He had canceled deliveries, stopped mail, and left behind a solid month's head start. List spent the next 18 years hiding in plain sight. He traveled across states, adopted a new name, and built a new identity. He worked as an accountant again, joined church groups, remarried, and blended into communities that never suspected his past. His calm demeanor and strict habits made him seem respectable. No one realized the quiet man in their pews and offices was the subject of one of the most intense manhunts in New Jersey history. The break came in 1989, when the television program America's Most Wanted aired a segment about the cold case. The producers commissioned a forensic sculptor to create an age-progressed bust of John List, imagining what he might look like after nearly 2 decades. The result was startlingly accurate. A neighbor in Virginia recognized him almost immediately and called the police. Within days, authorities arrested him at his new home. He denied his identity at first, but eventually confessed in court, explaining his reasoning with the same quiet conviction he'd carried in 1971. He insisted he had acted out of fear of financial ruin, believing death preferable to hardship. The jury rejected his explanation. He received 5 consecutive life sentences. He died in prison in 2008, leaving behind a case remembered not for its violence, but for the cold discipline with which it had been carried out and the long years he lived among unsuspecting neighbors. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.